Recently, the new 007 was to have been TV's Remington Steele, Pierce Brosnan. He apparently missed out on the part when NBC decided to pick up the MTM-produced series after it had been canceled.
Pierce Brosnan was my childhood James Bond. I grew up watching Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. He was my very first James Bond. The first Bond film I saw was Goldeneye, and he was the one I most associate with the role of James Bond. What I love about Pierce Brosnan is how I feel he really tries to do an overall portrayal of James Bond while giving it his own unique spin. Pierce Brosnan was able to get the charm and the danger of Sean Connery with the great wittiness and sophistication of Roger Moore. And with that as well, he really tried to get Bond into more of a human character again, a bit like what Timothy Dalton tried to do and what Daniel Craig, later his successor, went on to do next. And I'd always wished that he had done more Bond films. We've talked in the past about whether he could have done a potential fifth film, but what if he started when he was meant to, in The Living Daylights? Timothy Dalton wasn't the original actor to play Bond in The Living Daylights, it was actually Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan's wife had the role of the Countess in the movie For Eyes Only, where he met the Bond producers, and there were sort of jokes about that he would become the next James Bond, and lo and behold, he would be. Pierce Brosnan was going to be announced as the next James Bond to replace Roger Moore in the franchise. However, there was a slight issue with the cancellation contract of his hit show, Remington Steele. In the contract, they had 60 days to sell the show to another network, and obviously news had leaked a bit about Pierce Brosnan becoming the new James Bond, and this helped them sell the show Remington Steele to another network, and because of this, he couldn't take the part. I've often wondered, what would it have been like if Pierce Brosnan had started in The Living Daylights, not Goldeneye? And that's the question of today's video. We're going to look at what if Pierce Brosnan starred in The Living Daylights and License to Kill. But before we get into that, can I just ask everyone, please, if you haven't already, don't forget to like and comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're trying to reach 1,000 viewers and 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and it'd be really great if you could help us reach that target. But without any further ado, let's get into this wonderful what if. So to start off this what if, I think the thing that we're most interested in, me and you watching this, is not really going to say how him doing Living Daylights and License to Kill would have affected Goldeneye to Die Another Day, but more about how different Living Daylights and License to Kill would be. There's no doubt about it that these films would be different compared to how they were with Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton was a much darker, edgier Bond, if you will. I still think to this day the most edgiest Bond we've ever had. Pierce Brosnan wanted to go in that direction, but not to the degree that Timothy Dalton did it. Pierce Brosnan was very much about, if you will, how Bond reacts with other people, how he has relationships and past relationships with people, and how he has to be, his mindset, if you will, in interacting with these different people. So that being said, I think when it comes to The Living Daylights, one of the big differences we would have had if Brosnan was starring in The Living Daylights would have been the relationship between Bond and Kara would have been 10 times bigger in the film. I believe, if you will, a sort of love triangle would have appeared between Bond, Kara and Koskov, and that would have been much more of a thought and main focus of The Living Daylights. I believe having this love triangle would have been a very interesting dynamic to have in this film, and it would have taken the script, if you will, in a new direction and a different perspective on things. You would have the rivalry between Bond and his villain, and Bond and the villain fighting over the leading lady. But as for the tone and style of Living Daylights, I think it would be, other side of that, quite similar, if not as less brutal. I still think if Brosnan being cast, the Bond producers would have wanted, very much like they did with Dalton, to go back to its roots, be a bit more darker, be a bit more serious, get more to the style of what Sean Connery was, and Brosnan could do that, but I don't think it would have been as far as what Timothy Dalton did. I think people would have accepted Pierce Brosnan a lot more than what they did at the time with Dalton as James Bond in The Living Daylights. I think he was one of those people, a bit like Roger Moore, where everyone in their mind already assumed, you know, yes, he is James Bond, we want him as James Bond. So when they finally see him on the screen, they would have been much happier and much more open to him than I feel they were with Dalton. Me, myself, I'm actually, and I'm going to shock you all here, I am actually quite glad that he didn't play Bond in this movie. If you look at Pierce Brosnan at the time, I think honestly he's too young. I feel at this point Brosnan would have been too young to play James Bond in a weird way. I still think he would have done a great job of it, and heck, he is my favourite James Bond, but he would have been too young at this point, and I feel it would have slightly taken away from some of the stuff in The Living Daylights having such a young Bond. But moving on from that, now one of the big things we are here to talk about is License to Kill. License to Kill is very much, if you will, the quintessential Timothy Dalton movie. I say this in a way that I feel Moonraker couldn't have been made without the Roger Moore James Bond. License to Kill could not have been made without the Timothy Dalton Bond. It was tailored specifically for his style and tone, and if you had followed The Living Daylights with Pierce Brosnan with License to Kill Pierce Brosnan, this would have been an absolute mess more than what the film originally was. I just don't see License to Kill working with the Pierce Brosnan James Bond. I compare this, if you will, to The Man with the Golden Gun. In The Man with the Golden Gun, Roger Moore was made, if you will, to play against his style, his type, and it just didn't work in so many places. The most famous one of all is the interrogation of Maud Adams' character where he slaps her and interrogates her, and everyone admits it just doesn't work. And I think the same would have happened here with Pierce Brosnan. The real tone of License to Kill just doesn't suit the style of Bond Pierce Brosnan is. And because of that, you would have had a Bond here that's not playing very well. So if you look at it from the context here, I can't help but feel that the reception to License to Kill would have been, believe it or not, even worse with Pierce Brosnan than it was with Timothy Dalton. This would have been, as I mentioned earlier, this Man with a Golden Gun situation where it's just not working and you've tried to mould Brosnan into something that he's not. And I think the film would have done, believe it or not, even financially worse, even potentially more than A View to a Kill. It'll be interesting looking at this point now because, again, we Bond fans know that this enters a very critical juncture at this point. We've had now Timothy Dalton in two films, The Living Daylights, which was received very well and people enjoyed him in, and License to Kill, which people probably didn't like him in and felt this was completely wrong. With that as well, you've now got the long hiatus and the legal lawsuits and the stepping down of Albert R. Cubby Broccoli. So the question we now have to ask is, where would everyone's mindset be now if Pierce Brosnan was James Bond? You would have had a film that really worked, and then you would have had a film that didn't really work. People, I'm sure, will be questioning, when Bond does come back, when will Bond come back? Will it still be Pierce Brosnan? Will it be some other actor? All these things, I imagine, must be rushing through people's minds. I can't imagine what Pierce Brosnan must be feeling in this timeline. Is he going to do another film? He wants to do another film. When are they going to finally make it? Etc, etc, etc. You know, at this point, we would have been thinking it would have been Timothy Dalton and potentially The Property of a Lady, which will obviously get morphed into Goldeneye. So the question is, would Pierce Brosnan still continue? And the answer to that, for me, is yes. So now we have the transition between Albert R. Broccoli and Barbara, knowing that you've got a well-established Bond that people actually do like, given the right material, going into a new era of James Bond. It's up to Barbara and Pierce, just like in the original timeline, and Michael G. Wilson, to reinvent Bond for the modern era. And here comes Goldeneye. For those who don't know, Goldeneye is my absolute favourite James Bond film of all time. It is my favourite James Bond film, and in this timeline, I just can't help but feel, with the success of Brosnan in The Living Daylights, now coming back, bringing James Bond back into the modern era with Goldeneye, this would have been his Goldfinger, his Spy Who Loved Me. This would have been his third film triumph. Remember, Bond was off the air for 6 years, and all that hunger wanting a new Bond film, having a Bond that you already know and is established and people actually do like, giving him a story that suits him and really elevates him, people have just gone even nuts, and Goldeneye would have been as much big success than it already was, and it was already a big success. Can you imagine having Living Daylights, License to Kill, The Down Point, and then Goldeneye? It is equivalent, in my opinion, to Live and Let Die, The Man with the Golden Gun, and The Spy Who Loved Me. It would be history repeating itself here, and all for the right reasons. Goldeneye comes out, it shows that Bond still can carry on, it can evolve, it can change. You've already got this actor that we already know and love and accept as James Bond, and this now will probably become his crowning achievement in the Bond franchise. But we've still got 3 more films to get through in his tenure. Obviously here we've got to talk about Tomorrow Never Dies, World's Not Enough, and Die Another Day. All of them really good films in their own way. I'm speaking more about Tomorrow Never Dies, The World's Not Enough, to Die Another Day here. Let's just focus a bit here on Tomorrow Never Dies and The World's Not Enough. I think those 2 films would be exactly the same as they are. There's no reason to suspect they would be any different. The only difference I think would be is I think, weirdly enough, they would have had better box office results than they had. Now, they did really, really well, don't get me wrong. But I believe now, with the momentum of the last 3 films, they would have just elevated and people would have been going, yes, Brosnan, 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 go Brosnan. You had him in Goldeneye, then you had 20 Never Dies, and he has Well's Not Enough. He's now done 4 Bond films. This is incredible. We now come to his 5th film, which would have been, and his last, Die Another Day. Now, we all know Die Another Day for me is my ultimate guilty pleasure James Bond movie. It's so bad, it's good. And I can't help but feel, after all that Brosnan's been through, what a terrible way to go. Can you imagine, after all this we just talked about, that Brosnan's last film was Die Another Day after all of this? It just makes it even more annoying how Die Another Day turned out. Die Another Day in our timeline is already considered an annoying, like one of the worst Bond films ever, and it's such a shame that Brosnan's era ended on that note. And I believe that ending it now, even still on Die Another Day, after all that we've just talked about, all we've gone through, would have been considered one of the worst endings all time, even topping A View to a Kill. I've always got annoyed in the film series how Bonds have never really ended on a high note until Daniel Craig's No Time to Die, in my opinion. And it would have just made Die Another Day much more of a sour pill to take. So what would have, considering all that we've discussed here, pierced Brosnan's legacy have been? And I feel it would have been a tremendous one, but ending on one of the worst notes possible in history. I think you'll look at Pierce Brosnan's era from this timeline, looking at he was someone who helped the transition between the old guard into the new guard and kept the series fresh, alive, made it modern, made it relevant, and it kept going and shown that Bond could continue after the Cold War like he did. I also feel, looking back at this, we would have looked at Living Daylights very differently. Certainly License to Kill would have been a very different movie. Almost, if you will, one of the worst films of all time, in my opinion, if it had Pierce Brosnan. But overall, the biggest thing I feel I can take away from this is just, once again, this proving my longing and wish that we had more films in the series with Pierce Brosnan. That would have either been after Die Another Day or The Living Daylights. Certainly. It would have been just really great to see my favourite James Bond do more films. And that is my what if Pierce Brosnan was cast as James Bond in The Living Daylights. Now I want to know, everybody, what are your thoughts about it? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you glad he started in Goldeneye like myself? Do you wish he actually had started in The Living Daylights? I want to know. Comment down below and tell me your thoughts and feelings about this. As always, my name's Henry and this is the Bond Geek. Goodbye.